Nice. Okay, I see a lot of familiar faces. Could someone put our word in the chat so that I know the chat is working, please? Yes, Carolyn, kindness. Awesome. Elaine, yes, kindness. Kindness says hope. That is great. Teresa, kindness. That's exactly what we want to see. You will notice that I am joined by a special guest this evening. So I'm going to introduce Kristina and then I will pass straight over to her and we're going to be talking about creating believable characters. So Kristina Adams is the best-selling author of the What Happens in series about two friends who get caught up in the world of celebrity. She's now working on the spin-off series, Hollywood Gossip. She's also published 3 non-fiction books for writers, Writing Myths, Productivity for Writers, and How to Write Believable Characters. In 2021, she started publishing her fantasy series under a new pen name, Kristina Adams. The series is about a mother and daughter who just happen to be ghost hunters. Think of it like an English Gilmore Girls with ghosts. When she isn't working on her books, she's freelancing as a content marketer, teaching over at the Writer's Cookbook, or spending time with her dog, Millie. And Millie is possibly the cutest Westie I've ever seen. So hi, Kristina, and thank you so much for coming in to chat to us today.
Thank you. Millie will be very pleased to hear that compliment as well. It will go to her head. It will.
Well, that's okay.
Say a quick hello?
We'll allow
it. Really confused. But this is Millie. This is my little girl.
Yeah.
Do you want to get back in your chair? Yeah, we'll put you back on the throne. There we
go. Okay, I'll hand over to you and we'll get started.
Awesome. Thank you for inviting me. Let me find my slides. Can everyone see the slides? Yeah, awesome. Okay, these are all the books. Shane's already introduced them and already introduced me. So there's not a lot I can say other than that. Shane's already said it better. So are we ready to dive in? Give me some thumbs up, some nodding. Yep, I see some nodding. Awesome. So if you do want to get in touch with me, I recommend Facebook because I'm really bad at replying to emails, as Shane knows. I'm experimenting with TikTok as well. So if TikTok's your thing, do come say hi because I still don't really know what I'm doing, if I'm entirely honest with you. So why do believable characters matter? Why do you think believable characters matter in our fiction? Why does it matter if people can go, oh yeah, that could really happen, or no, I don't believe in ghosts, so I'm not going to believe these characters are real or not? What an adorable fluffy pooch. Thank you. You are a cute fluffy one, aren't you? Relatability. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Need to know the reader in a world. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I missed one. Otherwise, who cares about the story? Yeah, exactly. It's also worth thinking about readers remember characters, not plot. If you think about your favorite books, most of the time you're going to remember those characters and how they made you feel. You may not remember every single plot point. Like, I can't tell you every single plot point in Gone Girl, but I can tell you how much I love those characters and the execution of it and the debates I've had around that book and those characters. The other thing to consider is that it can take up to 8 books for readers to remember your name. That's a lot. I've published 20 in 4 different series. And none of those series have reached 8 books. So this shows that readers are loyal to characters, not necessarily to the writers. You've got to work to build that relationship, and that starts by building characters that they care about. And when your characters feel believable, when they feel real, when they feel human, you then create a deeper emotional connection with the reader. But also on a more personal level, if your characters are believable, they're more fun to write, and they're also easier to write. So then you're less likely to get stuck. And if you do hit that roadblock, it's easier to figure out what a character might do. So what one thing do you need to understand to write believable characters? You need psychology. And this is one of my favorite topics. Like, my life is basically, at this point, it's writing, it's psychology, it's dogs. And I got into skincare and nutrition because of the dog. That's how ridiculous this dog is. But your character does not need to arc to be believable. I have side characters who have not changed in 5 books, but they are my most popular characters. And it's got nothing to do with the journey they go on. It's to do with who they are. It's how they speak. It's how they interact. It's all the things we're going to cover today. And make sure you've got something to write with as well, because I am going to have a couple of writing activities for you to get to know your characters better shortly. Yeah, so it's their personality that makes your characters believable, not necessarily what you put them through, but the two can work together to add more depth, and that's something we're going to explore. Believable characters are built on how they speak, how they react to their own emotions, how they react to other people, how they react to the situations you put them in, how they interact with their environment. Like, I am that annoying person who references the dog all the time. Some people who have dogs don't, but I am that person. And also things like their hopes and their fears. So let's start with how you should describe them to yourself and how you should think about them. I'm really not a fan of words like hero and villain because I feel like they're limiting and they can imply roles and behaviors. One of my most popular characters, Trinity, she fits the villain mold. But then people read the book written from her point of view and they feel sorry for her because she's had a very traumatic upbringing. And the reason she's constantly badgering the characters in the What Happens in and Hollywood Gossip books is because she wants what they have, which is the found family in the series. And she doesn't have that, and she tries to get it, and then she kind of sabotages it herself because of what's happened in her past. And if I had thought of her purely as a villain, she wouldn't have had the same level of depth. And it's when I changed to thinking of her more as an opponent that it became much more interesting for me to write, because I started to delve into, okay, well, why is she doing it this way? And I've had a lot of readers say to me, I can't believe you made me feel sorry for this character, because she is one of my most hated characters. So that's why I say be careful digging yourself into a hole before you start, because it's another way that you can get stuck. And even villains think that they are doing the right thing. And that's something that is really worth keeping in mind, because those opponents will have more interesting backstories if they think what they're doing is for the greater good rather than just because they think it's fun. Let's start with how you describe those characters. Consider she walked quickly versus she jogged. He said angrily versus he shouted. Now, I'm sure you've heard the adjectives and adverbs thing. I'm a copywriter. I'm not completely against them, but he shouted is a lot more vivid than he said angrily. And I would say, actually, this is something you want to worry about in editing rather than writing, because unless you are the kind of person who writes description first, if you bog yourself down worrying about these kinds of details, then you're going to find it a lot harder to get that first draft done. I do believe in, well, for me personally, I write the dialogue first and I add in a lot of the description later. You don't have to do it that way, but also find a way that works for you that doesn't have you going into a mad panic because you've got so much to do. And that's why I primarily do dialogue and plot first. Description is also more interesting if there's a reason why someone looks, sounds, or acts a certain way. Like, it's one thing to say that someone dyes their hair. Why do they dye their hair? I dye my hair because I find my natural hair color boring. There are better examples than that, but that's the one I came up with just now. This is an example from Denise Grover Swank's book. I can't see the title. 30.5 Excuses. And this is the first time we meet this character. And I'll read it and then we can discuss it. When I walked into the church office, Jonah's secretary eyed me up and down with a look of disapproval. She had salt and pepper hair and had to be in her late 50s, although her ultra-conservative long-sleeved blouse buttoned to the top and her long skirt suggested she'd walked straight out of the early 20th century. What sort of vibes are you getting from this character? What do you think of her? Pent up, dull. Yeah. She was exactly those things. Stuffy, that's a really good one. Prude, yep. Judgy. She is all of those things. She was not a nice character in that book. And you get that all from that very short description. And I think that shows the power of the right description. So here are some examples of things you can do and different ways that you can describe characters. And these are going to be related to our first writing activity. You don't have to use these. These are just some examples to use. So if you want me to go back when you're writing, let me know. So for looks, you could have someone with chocolate brown hair with auburn highlights. You could describe their coily hair, the golden flecks in their hazel eyes. Maybe they wear loose-fitting clothes or too tight clothes. They're two very different types of people. Side note, did you know tight clothes are psychologically comforting? And that's why some people wear them. Long nails, they work kind of like a weighted blanket. Long nails filed to a point, great for Halloween. Scuffed leather shoes, or hunched shoulders on a 6-foot frame, which I have noticed a lot of my tall friends do hunch over quite a lot. Shane's nodding in agreement. Sound. Maybe someone has got heavy breathing. Is that because they're asthmatic? Is it because they're nervous? Maybe they've got a hoarse voice, which I'm probably going to have by the end of this. Maybe they've got a soft voice, or they're noisy. Things are noisy around them. They might speak gruffly. They might be husky. They might sound angry or upbeat. Maybe they're monotonal, or they speak quite animatedly. Smell, musky perfume, sandalwood, that's in a lot of perfume, cinnamon, cookies, bleach or cleaning products, hair dye chemicals, dog, cat, or ferret, which is a lot more noticeable to people who don't have those animals. Blackcurrant, I mentioned that just because I really like blackcurrant. Cigarette smoke or alcohol. Some of these things are a lot more noticeable to people who aren't used to being around them. Like, I don't eat or drink dairy, so I can smell it a lot more, even if someone's just had it in a cup of tea. Touch, maybe someone's got calloused skin from playing the guitar. Maybe they've got soft skin because they religiously apply hand cream. They might have silky skin, cotton like rough, or maybe they're muscular. Maybe they're squishy or bony. These aren't just people. You can use these to describe a few different things. Maybe they can taste red wine or peppermint, a roast dinner, a fry up, or their shampoo. You know what it's like when you get shampoo in your mouth. It's not nice. Or chlorine if they've just been swimming. So now I want you to bullet point some notes around your main character and the 5 senses. What do they look like and why do they look that way? Why do they sound that way? Why do they smell that way? Why do they feel? What does their skin feel like? And why? Or what does their hair feel like as well? And also, what can they taste? And I'm going to give you 3 minutes for that because you're only bullet pointing. You don't need huge amounts of depth. It's like jotting down ideas. So when I can find the clock, and I apologize if you can hear Millie crying. She's not happy that she's in this room with me. So I shall see you in 3 minutes. Got just over 30 seconds left. So if you want to wrap up what you're writing now, you can always go back to this later. And if there's anything interesting you've come up with in the chat, do let me know in the chat. I would love to hear it. And that is your 3 minutes. Okay, Teresa says, I'm stuck on what do they feel like. So with that one, I think it's something you could go back to, but I would consider, what's their skincare routine like? How well do they look after themselves? Are they out in the garden a lot? I always think about my mother-in-law who has quite dry hands because she does a lot of gardening, or musicians have quite, particularly guitarists can have quite dry hands from plucking the strings, or maybe they moisturize all the time because they are terrified of getting the slightest hint of a wrinkle, something like that. Juliet says, I have to make up my mind how magic smells. That's a tough one. That's a good one, though. I think that would make your magic really memorable to your reader. I've got a really good interview with Alexa Whitewolf on the Writer's Mindset about this, actually. She talks about how to bring your magic systems to life through using things like this. She's great at this. Shane's nodding agreement because he's worked with Alexa as well. She's great. And also with vampires, like she has an encyclopedic knowledge of them. Teresa said smooth young skin. Yeah, that's a good one. But also don't forget, it's not just young people who can have smooth skin as well. It's about someone's nutrition, it's about their skincare routine, it's about if they have a vitamin deficiency, it's about if they exercise, if they wear sunscreen. There are lots of things that can factor into their what their skin and hair actually feels like. Ed says magic could smell like ozone or electricity. I like that. That's kind of cool. Teresa says the character is not young. Yeah, okay, that's fair enough then. Okay, so mouse using description. When you do it, you want to make sure that it is a part of your story naturally and you're not info dumping and having like a page of it. And you might have been able to get away with that 50, 100 years ago with having these long reams of description. But in most cases now, that will lose your reader, particularly in commercial fiction, particularly in the earlier stages of your book. You want to include what's relevant and then let the readers fill in the rest. So, for example, you could have a character say, I don't know, tossing her shaggy blonde hair over her shoulder. So that shows a little bit of sass. It shows what she looks like without going into lots of detail, but you can clearly see what she looks like. So now I want you to use what you just came up with and write about your character from someone else's point of view. And this could be a character in your story or even your ideal reader. And consider how that person feels about your character based on the information that you've come up with. What does that information tell that other person? Do they like your character? Do they feel a little bit uncomfortable around them? Think about the example from Denise Grover Swank's book where the character that the main character was watching clearly did not like Rose. And we can tell that based on the way Rose feels around her and the way Rose describes her. So I'm going to give you another 3 minutes because, again, you can always come back to this and we're a little bit short on time and I do talk a lot. So, yeah, if you think of anything or if you get stuck, do let me know in the chat. if you just want to wrap up the sentence or so that you're writing, did anyone find anything interesting from that? The point of this is kind of to get you thinking differently about your characters, because how one person describes something is very different to how someone else does. And if you're really in that person's head, then you're going to feel it very differently, hear it very differently compared to another character. No, I can't read it on that screen. Teresa says a heart-shaped face had a tender quality and a large expressive eyes revealed kindness in them. He watched her move, the way she carried herself denoted class. He'd been happy to notice no ring adorned her left hand. That's really pretty. I really like that. I can really see that character as well. Thank you for sharing that. So now we're on to my favorite topic, dialogue. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because great dialogue looks like what we think real speech is. Dialogue is a much more polished version and omits things like fillers and pauses. Like, I'm sure since I've been talking, I've been pausing and going umming and ahhing and things like that. And we don't realize that we're doing it. And it's only people who have heavily edited their videos or have a lot of public speaking training who don't have those things, because those fillers are often their thinking space. So we don't know that they're there. Sometimes they're a sign that someone's brain is like further ahead than where they actually are, and their words are just trying to keep up. And sometimes it's a case of they really have no idea. That will depend on your character. So dialogue is a really good example of things like social status, someone's academic qualifications, their culture, their personal opinions, and even their confidence levels. This is an example from one of my old jobs, actually. And I'm curious to know, which would you say? Would you say I'm starving, or would you say I'm ravished if you were hungry? Which would you say? Yeah, pretty much everyone's saying starving. One person said ravished. Mouse. So consider the option you did not pick. What does that say about the type of person who would use one or the other? And I'll just tell you the story that inspired this. It was at my old job, and my colleague's son had said to his friends that he was ravished. These were teenage boys, and his friends teased him because he was 15 using the word ravished. And Madeline has hit the nail on the head. It sounds posh. Ed's saying they're British. Ravished sounds British. I am British. I do not say ravished. There might be some people. I'm not posh either. That might be the other thing. So yeah, he is British, the guy who said it, actually. But it is also cultural. It is also a status thing. So consider those little tweaks in word choice that can influence things, because they do make a difference to how your reader will perceive that character. Does anyone know this phrase? Is anyone familiar with it? Let me know in the chat. Shit. Shane's nodding at me. I'm not sure how many other Brits are going to know this one. Okay, A up me duck is a greeting from where I'm from in the Midlands. And it basically means hello. That's it. Duck is a term of endearment in this part of the world. It is sadly not used as much by my generation. It is mostly used by older generations, but I do get a little hit of dopamine every time someone says it. But it is heavily regional. It's obviously very colloquial and informal. You're probably not going to say it to your boss. It's also very friendly, but you might say it like if you walked into a cafe and you were a regular, for example, or a relative might say it. My nan used to say it to me when I came down the stairs and she hadn't seen me all day, So it does show a level of familiarity and also casualness. This is another example from Denise Grover Swank, because I think what she does and also what Rochelle Mead do really bring the characters and the world to life without breaking it up the story or anything else. And I just love the vividness of this little bit of dialogue. She says, "Oh, my stars and garters. I am so sorry. My mama says I don't have a lick of sense, just saying whatever pops into my head. She says I need an internal censor." You get such a feel for who this character is from this, how fast her mind races, how she's always just doing things without thinking, the relationship she has with her mother. It tells you so much. So now I want you to write a conversation between your main character and their opponent, only using dialogue. No description whatsoever. Not even he said, she said. Okay, maybe he said, she said if you find it a little bit hard. How can you show what they're doing without actually describing it? So if you want to show them pick up a glass of water, how can you show that without actually saying they picked up a glass of water? And how do those characters feel in each other's company? Are they comfortable? Is the conversation a little bit stilted and uncomfortable? Do they want to be there? I'm going to give you a little bit longer on that one because that's a bit more complicated. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes on that. Just under 30 seconds left on that. So if you just want to wrap up the little bit that you're on, don't forget you can go back to this after, or you can burn it, whichever you prefer. I know this is not a fun activity for everyone. One of my old uni lecturers sat as this, and I really love writing dialogue, and I still found this really, really hard to write an entire short story just in dialogue. It's I think it's a good challenge because it shows you the work that description does do, but also, there we go, time's up. But also the work that dialogue can do and how it can change the entire situation. I won't ask anyone to share stuff for that one because, again, it's hard. And also, it's hard to read out loud as well. So now let's talk backstory. Madeline said that was super helpful. Thanks. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that activity, even though it was really hard. But I know there are some people who do genuinely really despise that activity. So backstory. I'm going to preface this with, we can't cover everything in backstory, but I've got a couple of recommended reads on a page Shane will share at the end that will go into much more detail than I can. And I've got some of the courses and books and workshops that go into this in more detail as well. Something to remember is that if you meet someone and immediately tell them your backstory, they will like you less. And this applies to readers and your characters as well. There is a temptation, if you know your character's backstory, you should share it immediately with your reader. Please don't. I beg you, please don't. Readers don't want or need to know everything. You want to include backstory explanations when they're relevant and let the character's reactions speak for themselves. To give you an example, in the Afterlife Cause series, I have not covered the backstory in 2 of my most popular characters yet. One will come in book 6 and one will come in book 8, because prior to that, they're not relevant. And once the readers are emotionally invested in those characters, then they care and they will slow down with me to explore those emotions with the characters. And also then in the parts of the books that I've put them in, the characters will be able to overcome how they feel about things that have happened in their past rather than it being glossed over. Because one of my characters in The Mummy's Curse, I actually did have his backstory in it at the beginning when we introduce him, and I cut it because I thought one paragraph does not do the life story of a 4,000-year-old justice. So I cut it, and I've been biding my time to work out when is best to include it. And it's actually going to be book 8. And that gives it enough breathing room for my readers who really care about this character. He's my most popular character in the series, to explore it with him and really feel the emotions as he relives why he got cursed. But they're not going to care about that in book 2 when he's just been woken up and they're trying to work out why he got cursed. So when should you write backstory? Before you start, it's really useful because it can mean you do less editing. While you're writing, because you might figure something out even if you outline, and after you're done, particularly if it's a series. And something I will say, if you're writing a series, please put together a Bible. Please take Helen Scheuer's advice. I did say that right then, didn't I, Shane? Yeah. Because, yeah, honestly, I wish I had read her book sooner because I'm terrible for forgetting stuff. So if you've got a series Bible, you don't have to carry it in your head. And that gives you more space then to problem solve and figure out what your characters are actually doing. And there are little things like their eye color or what happened to their parents that you might not remember, but that might be relevant in a later book. And this is where it gets complicated. And we're here to, sorry, words. And we're really diving into the psychology here. What happened to someone when they were younger influences how they respond now. And their relationship with their primary caregiver, which is usually the mother, not always, is key. Siblings, teachers, other family members, and even friends growing up can also play a role. Because what happens in someone's childhood can actually change their brain chemistry. And this is closely tied to their relationship with their mum, like I said, but it can also be other parental figures. And something that's worth remembering is that a toxic parent to one child may not be to their sibling. It depends on the relationship they have, on the parent and what they think about the children, what happened in their own childhood. It gets quite complicated, which is why I say we can't go into all the detail here, but I've got the references. And negative experiences can have positive and negative impacts on someone. There's a thing called post-traumatic growth syndrome, which is actually where someone comes out stronger from trauma. It's rare, but a lot rarer than post-traumatic stress syndrome, but it does happen. The Umbrella Academy is a really good example of different relationships with a parental figure. And I've completely forgotten most of these characters' names, so I apologize in advance. I have the worst memory for other people's characters. But every single one of these characters has a different relationship with their dad. And because of that, that influences how they feel about themselves, how they feel about each other, how they feel about their dad, how they feel about their powers, how they feel about the rest of the world. It influences everything. And so if you want a deep dive into psychology, I cannot think of a better TV series than this. And also, I just really like this TV series. I just have a really bad memory and can't even remember the characters in Stranger Things. And I'm wearing a Stranger Things t-shirt. So it's got nothing to do with the quality of the show. It's just my memory. And Shane said that the book I was on about on a series Bible is How to Write a Successful Series by Helen Scheurer. Thank you, Shane. I couldn't even remember Helen's book title. Edwin says, love the Umbrella Academy. Yeah, it's great. I can't wait for the last series. Although it's probably going to be a while with the strikes, but it'll be worth the wait. Same as Stranger Things. So now let's talk about romantic relationships. And this is not just useful if you're writing romance, although it's pivotal if you're writing a romance. But if you've got romance as a secondary part of your story as well, it's worth keeping in mind. Unstable parental relationships can lead to unstable romantic relationships because people try to fix what went wrong with their parents in the future partner. So quite often that partner will have some of the same faults that their parents did, like, for example, being unreliable. That's a bit of a lame example. But you get what I mean. So it is possible for someone to break out of this cycle, but they have to be aware of the fact that they are doing it. And actually, that can be quite an interesting story, an interesting arc if you are writing gay romance as someone overcoming these things. Past romances also influence future romances. Relationships that end badly can lead to someone becoming jaded for future romances. And I don't know if anyone else has read Brittany's book, but I'm reading it at the moment. And she does actually say her relationships with Justin Timberlake and Kevin Federline completely ruined her. She's never trusted anyone since. So those very influential relationships at a very pivotal time in her life have left her jaded and untrusting. And there's probably a lot more to do with her family situation as well, but they certainly did not treat her well. And the other thing, and I cannot express this enough, is that your love interest must fulfill a need in the character's life. They should not just be there for eye candy, because it's the 21st century. And there are many reasons why that character needs more depth than just being there as a kind of prop. Please do more with your love interest. Please, I beg you, regardless of their gender. Please give them some depth. Make them interesting. So now I want you to write about your main character's childhood. Not what happened, but how they felt about what happened. Like, if they got into an argument with one of their parents, what did that argument make them feel like? Did they feel small? Did they feel hated? Did they feel not good enough? Maybe actually they disagree with their parent. They think their parent is wrong. And they decided that they would argue back. And it made them see their parent differently. And their parent got knocked off the pedestal that they had previously been on. Doesn't have to be an argument like that. Maybe they had a happy childhood. I'm not an expert in writing happy childhoods. I've got to confess that's not my thing. I like to give my characters a lot of issues. So I'm gonna give you 3 minutes to explore that. And if you find this challenging, just bullet point it. You do not have to write it in prose. Like, pretty much all of my ideas start out life as like random sentence fragments. Just jot down some ideas. Don't put pressure on yourself to write something perfect and shiny. We are just having fun here. We're playing about. You don't have to use any of this, or it can end up in your finished piece. Whatever works for you. So on that, I'm going to give you another 3 minutes. And there we go. Don't forget, this is something you can refer back to if you want to, or you can flash out if you think it might be potentially useful for your work in progress, or if it could inspire something in the future. Mouse. So let's talk emotions. You could say that a character is angry, or you could say that he clenched his jaw, curling his hands into fists. Or you could say she was heartbroken, or you could say that her lower lip quivered as she fought back tears. One of them you can see and you can feel, and the other one is just stating a fact, and you don't have that emotional connection between the character and the reader. So now I want you to write your main character reacting to something they're afraid of or that makes them angry. It could be their opponent, public speaking, spiders, celery, something else. Think about how they feel in that moment, not what's happening, but the physical and emotional reaction that it causes in them. So to give you an example, when I first started teaching live writing workshops, I used to get hit by really bad fatigue. And I know that it was this because it was exactly an hour before the workshop started. And it was my brain trying to stop me from teaching the writing workshop because I was nervous. So the brain is capable of doing very crazy things to stop us, but it is a very powerful tool. We don't have long. I might be running slightly behind. How am I doing for time, Shay?
You have 14 minutes.
Okay, yeah. Should just have enough time. Just. So I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes on this, and if you want to just jot some bullet points down, if you find that easier, whatever rocks your boat, just think about writing a paragraph or two, nothing crazy. We're going to wrap up the sentence that you are on. That is time. So the last bit that ties into this actually, which is the fun topic of flaws. Why would you say that flaws matter? Is it because A, they humanize your character, B, they make your characters relatable, C, someone practically perfect is unrelatable and unrealistic, or D, all of the above? Ed says D. D. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I like to give the example of Superman because he was written to be perfect and his only flaw was kryptonite. And now no one wants to see that. They want to see Superman humanized. And if you look at the evolution of the character, he is a lot more humanized. And actually, when I was practicing this earlier, my boyfriend interjected and said Batman is better. And Batman is human, let's not forget. He is very intelligent and has a lot of money, but he has no superpowers. And I think that shows you how things have changed since these characters were invented and how people's expectations of these characters have changed as well. So how do you choose a character flaw? Consider what they want and what might get in the way of what they want. And personality flaws can be quite useful here. Things like pride, greed, or lust. I would say pride's probably the hardest one to write. So be careful of that, because you will struggle to find something that helps someone overcome pride, because you can interpret everything as being done to give them an ego boost, essentially. But greed is a good one. Lust, I've forgotten the other deadly sins because my brain's not working. Julia says that's why I've always preferred Batman. Exactly. So, fear. Fear is probably the best thing you can use, and it's very common because it slams on the brakes faster than anything else. It's the most relatable flaw there is, because everyone is afraid of something, even if they don't want to admit to it. And a character must fight through their fear to get what they want, because that is your character arc. That is what makes the reader root for them, is whether or not they're going to fight through it. And to be fair, if you want a sad ending, they can not fight through their fear. But for a satisfying story and a hero's journey, they do need to fight through that. And also, for them to be able to fight through it, the thing that they get at the end must be stronger than their fear. There must be a real reason for them to want to get to the other side of that. And sometimes we are lacking that reason on a deep enough level. And this is why knowing things like the backstory can be really important, because it can not only help you work out that fear, but also the key to overcoming it. So some examples of flaws and fears: you could have someone who's afraid of letting their love interest in because of previous bad relationships, making them not trust people. Maybe you've got a musician who has stage fright, a scientist whose experiments constantly go wrong, so it's really damaged their confidence, a business person who neglects their family and the toll that takes. That's really common for people who run their own businesses. And so now for the last activity, I want you to jot down where you want your main character to be at the end of your book, and then consider what the biggest thing is you can put in front of them that will stop them from achieving it. And then maybe think if you could go just a little bit bigger, because quite often you will come up with something and then a day or two later you will realize actually you could push them even further than you thought you could. And actually, this is why I like reading books for writers like Shane's, like Sacha Black's, like Helen's, because it reminds you that there is still more to learn and that there is more that you can do. And when I read Sacha's book on writing villains, I realized that I could push my main character even further. And I had been foreshadowing it subconsciously from book 1 without realizing it. So if I didn't do it in book 4, the readers were going to feel deeply unsatisfied. And when I actually wrote that scene, it was just very deeply satisfying because I knew that was it. And also my readers responded really positively to that as well, because it was exactly what that character needed to grow into her powers, to essentially become an adult as well. And I'm trying not to like spoil the Afterlife Calls books here, because I really get told off for blowing out spoilers, but I pushed her further than I possibly thought I could, and it worked. So I'm going to give you a couple more minutes on that. Want to wrap up. That is the last activity. So, no, mouse. If anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments or whatever, do let me know. Julia says you should see the light bulbs coming from Germany with all the light bulbs that are going up for me now about my story. I'm really glad. I'm really glad that's helped. The book about villains is it 13 Steps to Evil?
Yes, it is. 13 Steps to Evil by Sacha Black.
Really good book. Really good book. She's got one about writing. She's got quite a few writing ones, actually. I'm so bad with titles. I'm so
heroes, prose, all kinds of things. Yeah. Hope, you have your hand up. If you want to ask a question, go ahead.
Hi, I noticed in your book on how to write believable characters, you have a section on interview questions.
Mm-hmm.
So can you give us what kind of questions do you have, how many, and do all the questions have to be answered? Yes.
There are a lot of questions. I think it might be like 200. It's been a while since I wrote them. But no, you don't need to fill in all of them. It will depend on your story and what you need, what you think might be useful. Some of it is, stuff like their hair color, their gender, so that you've got it written down and you can't forget what they look like. Some of it is stuff like probing into their relationship with your current characters, with people who were in their past. Some of it might be how they view certain things, like their political affiliation, because all of those things will give you insights into your characters that can help you add more depth and that will affect how they come across to you and your reader. But no, you definitely don't need to fill in all of them. I would say if you're stuck, go and fill in a couple of really random ones. Like there's something to do with how they'd face a dragon, for example. And sometimes the more random questions, even if you're not writing fantasy, can help dislodge something when you're stuck.
Just asked whether there'll be a replay. Yes, there will be a replay for sure. Okay, that brings us pretty much to the end of the hour. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to Kristina for coming in and speaking for us. This was absolutely amazing. Loads of love for you in the chat as well. So yeah, I didn't expect anything less from you. But anyway, it was fantastic. So
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. I will say goodbye to everyone.